Welcome, fellow adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking with Tim Wood, the founder of RightFinder, or just Tim, about how to become an irresistible games job candidate, and more.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
All right, in our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts. We know all y'all want to hear is how people got started in games. If you want to get started in games. This is a mostly unedited recording of a weekly event we host in our Discord on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, so feel free to swing by and join us for the next one. Ask your own questions live. I am your host, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster of the Indie Game Academy, a longtime game designer in the industry, and Gandalf's best friend. And today, we're talking with Tim Wood, a.k.a. the RightFinder, a.k.a. just Tim. Welcome, Tim.
Hello.
What are you having for lunch today?
Having me. I've got some homemade plant chicken burgers that I'm going to put together, and I'm going to chuck some lettuce on them, and I recently found out endangered sriracha. So that's my plan for the rest of the evening is to eat and to consume.
Is it at least free range sriracha? Has it been treated well?
I assume it was ethically slaughtered sriracha.
That's good. That's good. That's all we can ask for. Beautiful. Well, it's wonderful to have you back on the show. For those who are longtime listeners, you know Tim has been on the show before. Tim is a recruiter in the games industry and also a narrative designer, among other things, and also dude who swings sword. And I'm pretty sure one of the rangers of Lothlorien. Wait, that's not right. What's the area called where the rangers hang out?
Ithilien.
Ithilien, thank you.
Yeah.
Also, maybe a ranger of Lothlorien. Maybe in the next life.
Never know. We're a very secret society, the Rangers of Lothlorien. Right. Literally no one apart from you knows about us.
Beautiful. Well, Tim, welcome to the show. So I, for the past 2 weeks, we were talking about having Tim back on the show, and we were spitballing ideas for what we would actually talk about here. And I kept asking Tim to increase the spice levels. I almost got Tim to talk about negativity and everything that's broken. He insisted that we stay positive, so we're going to go for how to be an irresistible games job candidate. I want to try to push us beyond the boundaries and really talk about what the cream of the crop looks like in games jobs, Tim. How's that sound?
Absolutely. Sounds good to me.
Heck yeah. All right, let's get started. So why don't you, first of all, as always, tell us your origin story. How did Tim get to where Tim is, Tim?
Yeah, of course. Well, It all started at the very beginning when I was bitten by a radioactive recruiter, and no, I'm kidding. I spent all of my time in school not really knowing what I was going to do, and it's your classic story. I left school with my A-level results, and found my way into work through networking. My first sort of bit of networking was my sister introducing me to someone who eventually gave me my first job, which was all kind of telephone fundraising for charities. So kind of like telephone sales, but for a good cause. So it was a much easier sell, which definitely led to bolstering my own self-worth in my ability to do that job. And I've worked in a number of different industries since then. And after a couple of years of flitting around and kind of figuring out what kind of adult I wanted to be, I was fortunate to get a job as an internal recruitment administrator for a civil engineering company, and from there I've worked my way up to be a headhunter in different industries. I've been a head of recruitment in various industries and companies of different sizes, and kind of before I started launching my own businesses, I was a contractor. So I was the guy you got in when your recruitment function was either not working correctly or non-existent, and I would go in.
And you had to take them out.
Yeah, I had to take them out. Well, basically set everything up, get things working the way they should be, and working on stuff like the candidate experience and making sure everyone was doing what they should be doing in a recruitment process and making it, just a lot easier for everyone, essentially. And about 3 years ago, I set up RightFinder Headhunting to be an ethical agency, a beacon of fun and hope in the games industry.
Amazing. I've got a question for you. So I assume, is games your top choice for industries to recruit for?
Yeah, until we start recruiting sword fighting knights by the tens of thousands again, games is firmly where I sit. I've been a big time gamer since I was a kid. I used to play on a ZX Spectrum emulator when I was about 6 or 7 years old because we only had a Windows 93 when everyone else had the proper stuff. So I was kind of playing 80s era games because that's all we sort of had access to. And I've kind of grown over time, playing games like Age of Empires and stuff. And I only realised maybe 5 or 6 years ago that the games industry was something that I could potentially work in. So I kind of started to shift my focus towards eventually recruiting in it, and very happy to say I managed it.
Amazing. It is very rare for me to be told a game console or computer that I don't already know of. Did you say a ZX Spectrum?
Yes, but it was an emulator. It wasn't an actual ZX Spectrum. So it was running on a Windows 93 or 95. I can't remember. I was playing these really old games like School Days and a frog game where you had to eat loads of frog spawn and stuff like that. And that's what I spent most of my time doing, in all honesty.
Wait, if you were capable, okay, so everybody can Google this if you're curious about what a ZX Spectrum looks like, or if you're from over in the EU, the ZX Spectrum. It looks like kind of like a sort of crappy Commodore. So why, out of all the things you could emulate, a ZX Spectrum?
That's all that my dad had installed on his computer, so that's what I played, essentially.
Nice.
And eventually we had a family friend who got me into things like Quake and stuff like that when I was far too young to have probably been playing those games, and I've been a gamer ever since, really.
Amazing. Beautiful. What is your second favorite industry to recruit for? Asking the hard-hitting questions.
That's a very good question. I really love the world of marketing and communications. As a social media kind of strategist and copywriter myself, I've ghostwritten for lots of clients, and I've owned a creative agency in that space in my past. And I just really love it. I think a very good mentor of mine said that you should really recruit for industries that you know incredibly well. You can know recruitment, but you need to actually understand an industry to be an effective recruiter for it. So I've always tried to lean towards industries that at least hooked my personal interest. So yeah, Marcom's social media stuff I'd say is a close second, and happily there's a lot of those roles, usually outside of layoffs, within games. So it's a good kind of 2 for 2.
Amazing. All right. So then, now that we've gotten a thorough background to Tim, sword fighter, potentially raising an army to fight for indies against AAA's, ZX Spectrum. I think we covered all the bases. Let's talk about recruiting. So Tim, we talked about talking about what an irresistible job candidate looks like. I'd love kind of just an intro there. What do the best job candidates look like in your opinion?
So, in my opinion, there's no kind of one size fits all approach to what a perfect candidate looks like, because it's all about finding the right role for the right person. So what a big AAA studio with billions in funding would consider a perfect candidate is very different to what a small indie in a rapid growth stage would see a perfect candidate as. But in my mind, as a third party kind of headhunter who's asked to go out and find these individuals, there's a lot of things you can do to position yourself in the best possible light for you then going through that assessment. One thing I get quite a lot is when I do post my job adverts, I tend to get quite a lot of responses, which is great. I'm in a position where I want everyone I talk to get a job, because them getting a job means that the client will then pay me, and it also means someone's in a job that they want. So it's a win-win, right? But I get a lot of people send me messages like, "Hi Tim, I saw your job, I'm interested, let's chat." That's a great indicator of your motives, but from my perspective as someone who's maybe fielding hundreds of messages in a week, there's a lack of specificity there, and it makes my life harder, because if I'm choosing which 10 messages I look at in that period of time I've got set to look at those messages, I've got to hunt through a profile, I've got to look at extended links and stuff like that. And that is my job to do, and I will do it every time because I found some golden candidates that way. But if you're applying for jobs to people directly, you've got to imagine that that is your only chance to get their attention. So if you can make it easier for them to have a look at your resume, have a look at your portfolio or show reel, and see why you're awesome and they should get on a call with you right now, treat it like marketing. Lead with the headline, convince me to click on that profile and go, yeah, I want to talk to individual number one, because they've made my life easy, everything's easily accessible, and I can see straight away, yeah, you're great, let's get on a call right now. And I have done that many times. Someone sends me a message, I see everything that I need to see, and I'm like, I'm actually free for the next 40 minutes, do you want a phone call now? They've been with the client by the end of the day, perhaps had an interview booked the next day. So if you consider your reader, which is a common thread throughout marketing theory as well, and sort of cater to their self-interests and their needs, that's a really big green tick in my book.
I love that. Yeah. So this is going to sound a little bit like I am insulting you, but I really don't mean it. It's people who do your job for you. It's people who are, as much as possible, going, all right, Tim's got a lot of, recognizing Tim's got a lot on his plate, a lot of people reaching out to him for this role. I'm going to make sure that I'm making his life as easy as possible.
Exactly that. I mean, if you go through my LinkedIn history over the last week, you'll see that I put out direct adverts for 2 companies that I directly named because I have that agreement in place with them and I'm allowed to do that. The first advert, I got perhaps 47 messages in the first hour. The second job, I was away for part of the weekend and in meetings and stuff, but I had maybe 150 messages to go through. So immediately that's 197-ish messages that I've got to pass through in a week. That's my job to do. I pay myself to do it, or I'm paid to do it. That's fine. But if you break down the amount of time I've got in a week to look at profiles, taking away my business development calls, taking away my interviews, my writing, everything else I do, I might get, say, 4 or 5 hours to look at those numbers. Divide, let's say 200 average between 5 hours, it's a very limited amount of time per message to look at someone's profile and review it. So, make it snappy and give yourself every advantage by catering to that person. And also, there's a degree of that human nature in your head where you're like, this profile's really easy to read, this portfolio is well structured, I kind of like this person already. And you're playing on the subconscious a little bit, which is something I always do with my CVs, because I'm thinking, I want this interview and I want to beat my competition, so let's do it.
Very cool. I love I love what Rick says in the comments here, where he says, honestly, that's a skill that's good for any role in game dev. It's very true. And it's not even just game dev, actually. Anytime you're communicating with anybody, as Tim just suggested, marketing and communication, a huge part of it is, who is it that I'm talking to and how can I assist in this conversation? So if you're looking for publishers, for instance, publishers too are getting inundated with games trying to get funded. So how much of their job can you do for them? When you write a press release, this is actually a perfect example. When you write a press release, I don't know if people quite understand this, you are literally writing the article for people. And then they're probably editing it a little bit, but mostly you're writing an article to put on their website because you're making their job easier. We all had a lot to do. So I love that as a first tip. I would love to know. So I think there's a lot to talk about with approach. I have a personal story I tell in level 1 all the time to try to get people to understand that confidence is a huge part of what gets you jobs, and not cockiness. There's a big distinction between those two words, but coming in with that modest, this is what I do well, this is what I know I do well, gets you jobs. The short version of the story is I knew a manager who had 4 direct reports. The senior on his team was making about 165K. The 2 mid-levels were making about 130, and the junior was making 140, was making $10,000 more than the mid-levels. And I was like, well, what? Excuse me? And he came in and basically said, when I asked him how that happened, why that happened, this candidate basically came into the interview and said, hey, here's what I know you're looking for. This is what your job description says. Here's what I am capable of doing and why I think I'm going to hit all of that. And here's what I think you don't know you need that I am capable of bringing to the table as well. That's why I think I'm worth 140K, and I would really like you to match that number. And so he went and considered it and got approval for it. I think, in my opinion, I'd love to hear if you believe this, confidence as well, and not, it's a fine line, knowing what you bring to the table and really focusing on your strengths as well is a big part of what gets you jobs in addition.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say a degree of self-assuredness is absolutely a win. But I also recognize not everyone has that innate ability to do it. Myself, I'm a huge extrovert. I've been the result of huge amounts of privilege in my life just from where I've come from and who I am. And I'm very aware of that. But when you're in a position which is essentially selling yourself, selling your skills and putting yourself across, you kind of need to. You don't necessarily have to be super confident in yourself, but be able to inspire the confidence in you in others. So if you're applying for a job and you know that you hit most of the criteria, like I was saying before, present that information either written or verbally if you're in an interview in the easiest way for people to understand. And there's a million different frameworks out there I could talk about all day long, but a really simple example would be the STAR method of interviewing, and you can use this in the written format as well, which stands for the situation, the task, the action, and the result. So the situation could be, I'm Tim Wood and was asked to appear on the IGA lunch hour to talk about being a good candidate. The task was I had to share my subject matter expertise and life experiences in order to talk about it effectively. The actions I took were using a mixture of personal and professional anecdotes, explaining some theory stuff, answering some questions, and hopefully being a little bit entertaining at the same time. The result was an audience of 28 people, got some really valuable knowledge and insight into what it means to be a great candidate in the video game industry. So that's something that you could write out as a written format, either in a cover letter. You can have it in your CV in different sections, or if you're talking about it, you can go, yeah, the situation was this, the task was this, and you can actually use those headings. Like I've had candidates struggle in interviews with me before, and they're kind of talking around stuff, and I say, hey, if you're using the STAR method or something like that, you can say the headings. I'm not going to mark you down. Like whatever you need to kind of help yourself, it's all cool. Because at the end of the day, anyone that is interviewing you, they want to fill that role because it's holding up the pipeline or it's causing them hassle. Or if you're an agency recruiter, your hiring managers are going, well, where are my candidates, Tim? You promised me candidates instantly. And I'm like, why did I say that? So kind of leading in with that strong knowledge of what you can deliver and presenting that is going to inspire confidence. You don't need to go in a 3-piece suit acting like a super confident person. Like, be true to yourself, but just know yourself well enough and your skill set to go, this is what I do. Would you like to work with me or not?
Yeah, I love that. There's something to be said. Wendy in the comments here says my ADHD makes that hard for me, and I think many of us have struggled traditionally. I at this point am a pretty competent public speaker and just speaker in general. Definitely was not always that way. So I think one thing I want to say to everybody is that's very much a skill, and you can very much practice it and get better at it. And the way you get better at it, the way you get better at anything, is you just do the same thing over and over again. You spend hours on it, right? I wanted to throw out here the need for honesty, like don't lie about anything, definitely not, but also the knowing what you are capable of and what you bring to the table. I think there's like a real difference between somebody who is here's an example. Actually, we have a ton of professors that we work with, and on our level 1 weekend, we love to hire our own students to teach because they're like a couple of years ahead of the people who are coming into level 1, which in my opinion are some of your best professors, people who are just a little bit ahead of you because they really know the struggle that you're currently in right now. And something that we get with a lot of those more junior professors is they'll come in and they'll start teaching and they'll start talking about the ways that they might be teaching wrong. So they'll be like, all right, so I'm going to talk about this. It might not be the best example. That's one of their favorite things. It might not be the best example. And then they'll start talking about something else. Be like, blah, blah, blah. This is game design, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I don't know too much about it, but here's blah, blah, blah. And you can almost immediately hear how much less you trust that person, in that conversation. I really think that sort of that self detriment that a lot of people tend to lean into is in no way assisting you. And I think a lot of people do it because it kind of like eases the tension maybe, or it's just their personality or whatever. But in my opinion, at the very least, I'm curious if you agree, pulling yourself down or calling into question the validity of yourself or your abilities assists you in zero ways whatsoever.
Yeah, there's specific ways you can do it. I live in England, and part of our sort of culture for the majority is to be self-deprecating. But I found that you never kind of want to go, this is the right way and you must follow it. A great way to overcome that inner imposter syndrome and ability to self-deprecate, because I'm very prone to it myself. I wake up and have very blue days. It's just to go, how I would approach it is like this. You're not saying this is the number one way and the only way that you must follow. You're just speaking with confidence. This is how I would do it. And immediately you're not putting yourself above people or above any other type of methodology, but you're also not dragging yourself down. You're just putting yourself sort of face forward, being authentic, and also talking from a position of authority, because you can definitively talk from a position of authority about how you would personally do things. And that's a great way to bolster your confidence, especially if you're in a public speaking scenario or a live interview scenario where you're thinking, oh, I'm being pushed a little here and I'm not too sure about this, that, or the other. It's a great way to kind of galvanize yourself, but also put that messaging across. And just also in the back of your mind, the back of my mind always is, I'm never going to be the finished product. It's like when you play an MMO, you'll be a level 100 in gathering and hunting or whatever, but you might not be a level 100 in spellcasting. We've all got different levels. So just talk about how you would approach things. And that still puts across confidence, but you also don't come across in the wrong way, at least in my opinion. And I love that.
I love it. I love it. I think it's a great piece of advice. I think it's really easy for us to go, well, I'm not perfect yet. I've been making a lot of jokes lately about how my God is iteration. And I really believe it's true. It applies in so many different circumstances, and this is one of them. It's okay for you to not be the perfect candidate. It's okay for you to recognize you're not the perfect candidate. But as far as you landing a job and what's going to make you irresistible, you talking about you not being the perfect candidate is only going to shoot you in the foot. You'll get nothing out of that. You're not going to get somebody to hire you out of sympathy or something. They're just going to be like, well, this person's probably not the perfect candidate.
Yeah. There's no such thing as the perfect candidate either.
Right.
I have this particularly with new hiring managers who have never recruited people before. They come to me with this huge list in their job description. We want someone who can do this and someone who can do that and someone who can do that. And they've created an ideal in their head. It's like that, what's that film, Weird Science, where they create the perfect girlfriend out of all these magazine clippings and stuff. And it's just like, it's not possible. Each person is a human being that brings intrinsic value and intrinsic diversity of thought and other things to the table.
And intrinsic weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's okay.
They kind of convert into strengths as well, because they might go, oh, this person, Tim, we feel is an 8 out of 10 fit. And I'm like, well, great. That's a way that you can pay them additionally. Yes, they've got salary and benefits and all these kind of things. But if you want them to be a little stronger at this and they can do everything else, develop them. Create a strong internal narrative as a business and show how you've taken someone from A and got them to Z. So kind of, if you try and remove the thought of the ideal candidate or the perfect candidate from your head, no human being is perfect. I can say that definitively. And it's the same with candidates. A lot of companies, if they hired people that could do absolutely everything in the job description, they would still find something quote unquote wrong with them. They're too qualified now and they're going to be too expensive, and I'm threatened because I've got to manage someone who is superhuman. I think knowing your own worth and knowing what you can offer and framing that to a company and what they can get out of the relationship versus what you can get out of the relationship it is a lot more effective, because it's essentially a negotiation all the time. And no company's perfect either. Ideally we could all work in whatever location we wanted to with £1 million a year or dollars or whatever and have everything we need, but not every company can offer that. So it's kind of it comes down to almost a bit of compromise. Okay, yeah, I don't have 50 years experience in Unreal Engine because it's only 26 years old, but what I do have is this. And the company's like, okay, well, we can't offer you your own personal spaceship to get to work, but we can offer this. And you kind of come to an agreement there. So you can kind of go in with confidence knowing you're not the perfect candidate.
I love that. I love the whole concept of it being a negotiation, because it is, but I think it's easy to forget it on the other side of the table. It's easy to be intimidated and be like, oh shit, like, all right, I'm interview. This happens, I feel, really often, especially with juniors in the current job market. They'll land an interview and that's such a Moby Dick white whale moment that there's a ton of inherent pressure that comes onto that interview. And so once they are sitting at that table, there's like so much pressure to perform well. But I think like similar actually to pitching basically anything, pitching your game for publishment, pitching, to an audience or something like that. Chilling out and calming down and having it just be a conversation. We're just chatting. We're just getting to know each other really helps. And I think also what I like about the concept of it being a negotiation is you're vetting them. You should be anyway, vetting them as much as they're vetting you, and letting them feel that a little bit. Once again, don't be cocky or annoying about it, but letting them feel that a little bit actually, in my opinion, once again, makes them a stronger candidate.
Absolutely.
I really like people who are like, I don't know if you're thinking about this right, because that helps me build my business into a better place, and also makes me think that this person is going to bring stuff to the table that I didn't expect I needed.
Yeah. I actually look for that as well. So if a candidate asks me, some quote unquote difficult questions, depending on what the questions are, it can be a really good indicator of, oh, I reckon this person would be quite a good leader in the future. I had one candidate, I was telling them about the role, and they said, Tim, that sounds all great, but they are a startup, they're working in pre-production. What's their funding looking like in terms of runway because of all the layoffs? I don't want to be joining a job and then losing out down the line. And I was just like, well, here's the situation on funding. But I was just like, what an astute question. It shows me that they've got a wider commercial context and understanding. And, in any authentic interview, in the environments I feel that a lot of people here today would like to work in, asking a question like that to receive an honest answer, like you said, not coming across arrogant or anything like that, that's just going to be a good thing, and they will give you the answers, or if they need an NDA in place before they talk, fine. But it's when companies are really cagey with that sort of information, that's often a good sign to go, okay, like, let's unpick things a little further. Is this actually the right opportunity for me, or do I need to look sort of elsewhere? Because you need to be vetting where you're joining, because it's all about making sure it's the right role for you. There's nothing worse than kind of getting a job and thinking, oh, the job search is over, I can pay my rent and bills, great. 6 months later thinking, oh, I do not like it here for whatever reason, because that has an effect on your physical, mental and emotional health. It can affect your finances down the line if you do need to leave or look elsewhere, and it's just a whole ball of stress that no one really needs.
Love that very much. So I think it is in our most recent job search for the next team member at IGA, which I'll try not to reveal too much about or whatever. In the second phase of interviews, we had, I think, 2 or 3 of the candidates mention that what we asked of in that second phase, which was a take-home test, what we asked of in that take-home test was probably not ideal, and they wouldn't recommend doing it that way. They still did the test, but they were like, hey, for various reasons that I won't reveal, we think that this is probably actually a bad way to do it. We would do something like this instead, but I'll still do your test for you. Those people got marked much higher than a lot of other people, because I went yep, you're probably right. And at the very least, I love that you are critically thinking and you're not just doing what I tell you to do.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah, I've got a one more big question for you. There's a ton of great community questions, so I want to get to those. But here's my big question, and this is sort of maybe an unfair question. I don't know. What is it that gets people to the top of the payment band? Those candidates that you've seen that get maximum dollars out of their salary, what are they doing? How do they get that?
So there's 2 components to this question. The first is, what is the willingness of the company to pay at the absolute top band? There are some organizations out there, not all of them, but definitely some, and I've come across them in my time or had to work for them or with them in the past, where they go, this is our salary range. The absolute top end is, I don't know, 120k, and that's for someone who hits all of the points on the job criteria. They can turn water into wine, and they're just absolutely perfect. A lot of companies will have a very big salary band because they have parity across the organization, and sometimes they might have something called a spine point. So you'll have a base salary of 50k, a spine point of 52, then 54, then 56, then 58, then 60, and they're in the next salary band. So what they'll do is they'll offer you at the lowest part of a spine point, and if the candidate accepts, great. And when it comes to the yearly review, they go up a spine point, and it's a way to kind of reward people for being in an organization longer. It can tie into a learning and development pathway, and it's a way of kind of giving them room to grow financially within the organization. So that could be one of the reasons why they have that and they don't offer at the top. Companies, I dare say, always want to save as much money as possible because paying out less money extends your runway, especially right now where we're seeing studios go under. There's always that kind of cost balancing aspect to recruitment. The candidates I see that get the absolute top end of the spectrum, they are people like you gave an example of, Willem. They've really shone throughout that interview process and they've perhaps exceeded the top expectations that the hiring team had. It could be a candidate that is already got, tons of skills and experience that the team really want, or it's a candidate that they are specifically trying to get hold of from an organization. So one of the reasons I call myself a headhunter is because a lot of the time studios will come to me and say, Tim, we want these kind of designers. If it's someone like, Jane or Joe Smith, we would hire them in a heartbeat. So sometimes I'm literally paid to go nick someone from a company and bring them somewhere else and sell them. So then they'll pay. So there's a lot of different factors to it. It generally comes down to how much money does the company have and how much do they feel you meet the role. If they feel you meet the role, 9 or 10 out of 10, they'll often pay that top amount. It's why it can be helpful sometimes to work with a middle person like myself who can kind of be your candidate advocate and balance the needs of the client with the candidate and really go, well, actually, I think Willem is a great candidate because of X, Y, Z, and they've been critically thinking about these aspects. I think they could be developed into a future leader. And, they're currently on this salary, which is lower than your offer, but I know they're interviewing elsewhere and potentially going to get paid X, Y, Z more. So this is why you need to pay what they're seeking. So it all comes down to these weird commercial kind of negotiation nuances that happen, but often it's to either secure talent when it's in a very competitive market. So you remember the COVID boom of game dev, where it seemed that everyone was hiring. And it was a great time for me. That there were big salaries being paid out left, right, and centre. You're less likely, but not impossible, to get the top end of the salary right now because it is what recruiters call a buyer's market. There's so many people on the market looking for jobs through no fault of their own, and there's not enough jobs for everybody. So it automatically shifts that power dynamic to the companies. So the best way to get more money right now is really demonstrate and come forward to them with your inner credibility and authenticity and go, here's what I can do for you. Here's why I'm worth this much. And, don't be afraid to say I am, I'm interviewing elsewhere. It's not like a monogamous interviewing process. And I've asked, I'm looking for offers in this range. The more the better, it's all part of that negotiation process. I hope that answers your question, Willem, because I know it's quite nebulous.
Yeah. No, I think it gave us a lot of stuff. What was the you actually taught me a term there that I hadn't heard of before. What was the term called that is like there are these spikes in the payment band that you typically put people?
I don't know if it's unique to England or not, but in a lot of organizations I've worked in, they call them a spine point.
Spine point.
You tend to get them more in kind of like more civil roles, like local councils, hospitals, but a lot of big organizations use them as well. More of your traditional kind of blue-grey corporate logos and suit type organizations, they'll have salary spine points, and people call them different things. You've got salary grids and stuff like that in a lot of organizations where they go, for seniors, we only pay between, 50 and 60k. That's it. If someone wants 62k, sorry, we only go up to here. If you want 62k, you're a lead. We don't think you're a lead. Goodbye. It's quite, it becomes quite transactional and quite binary. So you'll find that in organizations that are probably 50 heads plus, depending on what kind of HR infrastructure they've got. But it's called spine points. You can Google it all and just kind of have a look at how the inner operations and nervous system of companies work. Building a good understanding of that can actually really help you with things like negotiations.
Very interesting. Yeah, I hadn't heard of that before myself. I wanted to, given what Tim just told us, which is largely about really just like nailing exactly what this company needs, and doing well in those interviews. Hello Crystal in the comments here mentions working with juniors a couple of times. And they mentioned these 4 things that they see that juniors don't do very well. They tend to not do do very well, which is one, not being prepared to answer basic questions, two, not being able to show or speak of their process, three, relying too much on AI. Don't do that.
Yep.
Don't do that. And four, not being truthful on their CVs. I wanted to throw out a tip that I've used myself and see what you think of it, Tim, before we get to these community questions, which is to make an interview prep doc. So anytime I'm going to go into an interview that I really care about, if it's a place I really want to work, and even if it's a place I only kind of want to work, depending on how desperate I am, I'll make a 10 to 20 page interview prep doc that includes a bunch of stuff. Includes one, like a little bit of history on the company. I'll read up on them. I'll make sure I know who they are, what they stand for, all of that. Two, definitely research on their game. I'll play their game. I even love to interview their users if I can before I get into an interview. So that I know who their players are and what their players need, and I can talk intelligently about it. I'll look up any terms or skills that are on the job description and do a little brush up on every single tool and include some of the most important things I learn. And all of those things mean that I can come into that interview and just like kick ass, and I can have it up on my other screen and like literally look at it like a cheat sheet, when I'm talking to people. And that means
the dream candidate right there, Willem. Those kind of things are super useful. Another underrated tip: have your own CV open. I've had this a few times earlier in my career. They go, right, tell me about your most recent experience. I'm sat there, I'm like, I've got no idea. So,
I did something.
Having a copy of your CV open, just gives you a refresh if you do have a bit of a moment where you can't remember something because of the pressure or whatever else going on. Or one memorable case, I was video interviewing and my neighbour decided that was the perfect time to trim the tree right next to the window and it started branches falling. So, have that open. If it's an in-person interview, which I know is kind of, the last time I did arrange one was probably 4 or 5 years ago. Take copies of your CV for the hiring panel, just in case they don't have it. All little things like that can really help. But like Willem said, like a prep document is absolutely golden. You can have the key things from the job description, the titles of their game. If you're an artist, have some visual references of the key art that they've put out, and maybe talk about how you could add to that. Or if you're a designer or a programmer, like look at their GitHubs, look at the GitHubs of the hiring people that are interviewing you if they're one of the programming team, and have a look at their LinkedIns. You can connect with interviewers. There's nothing wrong with doing that as long as you do it in a respectful way. Kind of give yourself all those kind of little bits of extra knowledge, but also standing out a little bit as well. When I was internal recruiting, if I had candidates connecting with me on LinkedIn and I could see that they were doing their research, I always made a mental note of who that was, because I'm looking for people that are doing everything they can to work with us, because we want that attitude internally when we're all working together.
100%. I love that. It's great to also just have it like for myself, totally selfishly. It's great to have that reciprocated and shown that it does work and that people notice it. I love too, for instance, like you mentioned, actually researching the people who I know I'm going to be interviewing with. Like once I've got a name, I'm going to go on their LinkedIn and learn a little bit about them and write that down in my interview prep doc. Because being able to just say, like, literally a one-liner where I say, like, hey, I see you're into Warhammer 40K. Like, that will make your interview so much better.
Yeah, I do that for client pitches as well. Like, oh, I see you're into yachting. I'm not, but I see you're into it.
Yeah. And then I like what you mentioned too about sort of your unique discipline and the skills that you portray there. When I do these, I'm a game designer, so I also love to come up with concept features and games that might fill under their repertoire and have those prepared as well. Here's some ideas I had for you. And sometimes I don't even mention those in the interview. But often I don't. That it's a 10 to 20 page doc. I'm not going to mention everything in that doc. But just having it all in the brain means I'm like ready and rearing to have a great conversation.
Absolutely.
All right. I have taken too much of your time. It's time for some community questions. We've got Brian on the stage for the first question. Brian, would you like to ask your question?
Hello, Brian.
Brian, you're muted.
Of course. Hello, Jim. Hello, Willem.
Hello.
So I noticed while I started working on my LinkedIn the other day, because I'm really just getting started and actually trying to find a job in the industry. Most of my experience is not industry related. I've got a lot of veterinary experience and a lot of things that I'm putting on there, but I'm not sure if it's going to help me. My question is, what job, I guess, should I be looking for while I'm trying to break into the game industry? Like, what is most adjacent that I can kind of hop from, or that would help make my LinkedIn look better?
Sure. So, Brian, first of all, what kind of role are you doing right now? And just give me a little bit of a top line rundown on the kind of things you're doing.
So most of my experience lately, at least, has been in veterinary medicine. I've been working at
Yep.
different vets
Oh, okay.
and helping with injections with dogs and doing heartworm prevention, medical kind of things.
Yep. Okay, so you're dealing with a unique customer base, um, a degree of pressure. I assume that if are you dealing with medicine and stuff like that at all? So you've got to have kind of a good attention to detail, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So kind of dosages and other kind of pharmacological things. That it really depends on a couple of things. First of all, if you've got any interest in things like if you're doing art in your spare time, if you see yourself as more tech aligned, so messing about with HTML or learning some coding languages, those are two obvious routes that you could go into. Additionally, you've clearly had to build a degree of kind of people skills and working with individuals, because they're often coming into the vet at a time of stress. I know I'm in tears whenever I've got to take my dog or cats to the vet, because they are my world. So, I could see you potentially doing quite well in something like community management, or perhaps even quality assurance, if that's more your gig, kind of the following different frameworks and making sure that things are doing what they're supposed to be doing. There's a degree of translatability there. This is going to be quite a top line answer, because I've not had a look at your full resume and LinkedIn profile or anything like that yet. So first of all, I encourage you to please connect with me and I can give you some more defined advice. But,
Thank you, sure
I'd
thing.
look for where you feel the fun is for you. If you think that you would enjoy writing, IGA do some great courses, I hear. There's tons of advice online how to get into a variety of stuff. But I'd say look for where your passion is within games, see what the closest fit feels like, and then go for that. Pedal to the metal. It might take some time. You might need to do it in conjunction with working in your current role or doing other things on the side. But it's very easy to go onto itch.io and sign up for a game jam. Nothing wrong with trying out different things as well. You might go into one game jam thinking, right, I'll go in and do some coding, or I'll go do some writing, or I'll do some composition or some art, and kind of find out, what feels like a good fit. And then I'd encourage you to just push forward with that.
Hmm.
Does that answer your question, Brian?
Yes, it did. That was very helpful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Awesome. And strongly recommend just trying stuff. You don't have to be right away. You can just try things out, and if you're wrong, it's okay. Landing any job is helpful, and you can always change careers.
Yeah.
All right, Spicer Audio's got the next question for us. It's the big one.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. So yeah, my question was, do you have any insight on game layoffs in 2024 and any kind of projections on the trajectory in general of the industry? That's a heavy
Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of layoffs, I don't have insight into things like upcoming layoffs. I'm probably one of the last people that studios would tell, unless they were trying to set up a degree of support for their internal staff, which some studios have done. They've let me know kind of, hey, we're putting out an announcement later today. Do you have roles available for these people, or could you talk to them? And I have that kind of arrangement with a few studios. In terms of trajectory and where I see things going, I have noticed a slow but steady uptick in interest for my services. And considering that I'm a vendor supplier who is an additional cost to the recruitment process versus internal, that is a good sign. A lot of kind of, I'd say, mid-size independents or kind of double A's are now looking for exec producers, lead producers, those types of positions, which often suggests that they are in pre-production or phase one of developing a game, and they're going to want to be hiring, more people. In terms of a definitive answer of this is when layoffs will stop and things will change, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I knew, because I've had many sleepless nights like the rest of us all have. But I am seeing a lot more opportunities now than I have, this time last year, November last year, and over Christmas. And I'm certainly a lot busier now. I've got quite a few roles on my books at different levels, which I didn't have, come December time. So I think things are getting better. We've seen a few AAA studios lay off a ton of people and then decide to open new studios in other parts of the world. Is that growth because they're kind of just trying to offset a negative? I don't know, but my personal estimation, which I can't really base on anything other than kind of gut feeling, I'd say around September we might see some stuff picking up even further, but we'll just have to see where the dice fall, I'm afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Spicer. I'm a little bit more comfortable making guesses because I might be wrong, and that's fine. I do also agree. I feel like, despite the fact that we're clearly still seeing layoffs, if you're only watching the number of new roles opening up, I do feel like we're seeing a slight increase here. We're starting to maybe trend line back up. My guess is that we're not really going to be back to normal until 2025, but maybe like mid 2025 we'll be okay again. And think of it as a line. It's a trend line. So like we'll be okay again mid 2025, but it will start to get better maybe towards the end of this year. That said, none of us know. If you hear anybody guess, they're guessing.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah.
But whoever did definitively know would be a very rich person.
Yeah. I think there definitely seems to be at least the trend towards fixing itself. Wendy's up on stage.
Hello, Wendy.
Hey, Tim, how's it going?
Oh, you're so quiet, Wendy.
I hope you're well.
Oh, okay, hang on, sorry,
It's okay.
I turned it down because I tend to be super loud. Is that any better?
That's perfect.
Okay, good. All right. Thanks for letting me know. So I have the great fortune of having a job. It's in higher ed, and I like it. It's getting me towards where I want to be. But a couple of years ago, I was unfortunately experiencing. I actually went through 2 layoffs or reduction in force. They put them. So I decided to go for my dream, which had always been a dream, to get into the gaming industry, and actually had an interview for my dream job at a AAA studio. I was so excited. I'll talk about this till I'm a senior citizen, but sadly didn't get it. And so the bug just never left. So I guess what my question is what tips do you have for searching while you have a job? I'm doing things like, I went through IGA level 1. I'm hoping to do level 2. I'm doing a software engineering thing to kind of build up some programming skills from some schooling. I just graduated with a 2-year degree in information systems / programming. So
nice.
I'm trying to, I'm in the, a lot of different Discords and try to, talk with people and help people out in the industry where I can. Just wondering what other tips you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And Wendy, I know how much stuff you're doing in other Discords because I've got the pleasure of being in a few with you. So I think you've got a lot of cool stuff that you're doing already. So I won't address what you're already doing, which a lot of it would be my advice already. But one thing I found very helpful when I was looking for roles whilst employed was to kind of really structure my time. And I apologize if I'm teaching you to suck eggs, but hopefully it's helpful for you and other people in the audience. But I'd assign time to search for jobs, and I would also assign yourself time to self-develop and skill up. So the set time for searching for jobs is so that you can give yourself a finite block to devote your full attention to looking for work. Because of course, when you're working a full-time job and looking for jobs as well, you will need that time for downtime, to let your brain rest, to make other connections in your head where you might think, oh, I could go here and I could message this person. It's important to have that. But you can also give yourself specifically measurable objectives by thinking, right, I'm going to approach these, let's say 5 people that are hiring managers in places that I want to work with. I'm going to connect with them. I'm going to apply for roles and I'm going to push myself forward there. You've already done a ton of stuff with regard to your programming. You mentioned an IGA course and some other things that you've been doing. So I'd encourage you to press on with that. One of the most useful things I found for getting people their first job in games is when they have done stuff like game jams or their own projects or volunteering to exemplify kind of their skill base and their potential. So if you feel that's something you could do, maybe if you've got a weekend here and there that you could do a game jam, or if you think, I'm going to make something in Godot or Unity or Unreal, whatever your preference is, I definitely encourage you to do that because it's all individual components of evidence you can use to then make a compelling case to get that role. And the thing is, Wendy, I know you didn't get the interview, but you didn't get the role, but you did get an interview with that kind of quote unquote dream job. So they definitely saw something there that they liked enough to commit time to interviewing you. So I'd say use that to galvanize yourself. Like you said, go on about it until you're a senior citizen, but keep adding the rest of that foundation to yourself, and you will get there. You can schedule as much or as little time as you want, but every single action you take to working towards game makes that likelihood far more likely to happen.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I actually just signed up for my first game jam, like, I don't know, a week or two ago. So
Nice.
fingers crossed. I'm really excited. Thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, and thanks. The tip about scheduling some time, so simple, but that's something I'm not doing. So thank you.
I love
You're
that.
very welcome. Best of luck with it.
Best of
Thank
luck,
you.
Wendy.
Thank
I
you.
really think, absolutely. I really think at this point in time that having another role while you work your way into games is actually the most realistic way to do it. So all the same tips apply, and you're doing a ton of it already, Wendy. So, congratulations. I'm doing a little clap here. I think building up those skills is a huge one, but I do think the fact that you're about to do your very first game jam means there's still a lot of room to just release games. And so commendations for jumping into that first one, but also volunteer for some projects if you can, or something along those lines. Like, get your name on released games. That's a huge thing. And then the one you hear all the time from us these days is what we hear constantly for how people are landing jobs right now is just networking. So in addition to scheduling those blocks for upskilling and scheduling those blocks for applying, also schedule yourself a block now and then to network. Go to some events, maybe do one a quarter, like something that's not going to burn you out, but make sure you're meeting new people and putting your name forward very confidently about what you're looking for.
Absolutely. And the good thing about things like game jams, I tell everyone to do game jams, but not many people do. But that's already an example that you can work within a pipeline, and that's one of the key things that hiring managers across all disciplines are like, oh, Tim, we want to make sure they can adapt to our pipeline or know they can work to milestone and things like that. And it sounds quite basic, we're all adults, we can all kind of meet a deadline, but they just want to see that kind of professional example to reduce the percentage of risk they perceive in your profile to taking you onto the business. So game jam away, do the next IGA one whenever that is. I might, you never know, just get your name out there.
Tim, if you join one of our programs, I will just mercilessly take advantage of you. Just kidding. I will never do that to any of my students. I love my students. All right. Surya, I think you've got our last question of the day. Would you like to jump in?
Hey, hello. How's my voice?
Hello.
Fantastic.
We can hear you fine.
All
How you
right.
doing?
Firstly, thank you so much for everything you've been doing for the community, Tim. I'm a fellow level 1 professor from last weekend. So.
Oh, nice.
All right. So my question is, so in an interview, typically you'd start out by discussing how you match their needs and your strengths, and you kind of get a baseline with the interviewer. How valid is it after this to also mention some of the things where you might not exactly match the JD? Should you be proactive in bringing these up, or just stay silent and wait for them to bring it up?
Personally, I would always bring them up, but I would never call them a weakness. I would just say some areas of development that I think this job could give me are X, Y, Z.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of frame this in a context. If I was going for a role where I didn't have as much technical skill, if I'm going for a programming job, I could say, hey, I've been doing C++ for 2 years. And I'm really confident doing these things. What interested me about this job was I can do maybe most of the stuff on the job description, but what I'm really interested in going towards are these individual components. So kind of frame them as development points. And I've outright said it in interviews where I say, look, yes, I'm getting paid a salary, but I also feel I'm being paid in skills improvement. And that's going to make me so happy here because I'm going to be learning, the nuances of internal recruitment and how to relate to high level stakeholders and stuff like that. So I'd bring them up because they might have identified those themselves. So showing that self-awareness and ability to be introspective is very useful. Another good thing you can do in an interview, which you'll see everywhere as advice on LinkedIn and stuff, I'm sure, is just to go, hey, you know, at the end of the interview, when they ask you if you've got any questions, just say, yeah, is there anything in my profile that you feel could be a development point that you wanted me to go over quickly now? Or, you know, is there anything that might give you a slight concern about hiring me? I'd love to have the opportunity to address that with you because I'm super keen on the job. And that can open up some really good discussions. And, you know, from my own personal experience with candidates having done it and myself, that's always gone down pretty well with hiring teams, at least the good ones. And the ones that don't react well to it, you don't want to work there, essentially.
Right. So like to sum it up, showing a sense of being wanting and willing to improve on yourself, to wanting to be more aware of yourself, as well as framing it as more of this is where I want to get to rather than this is what I'm lacking.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I mean, if you think about it, the hiring teams talking to you are more often than not going to be your line managers, or they're going to be people from perhaps HR. So they're individuals in organizations that are there to essentially make sure you do all your work, but also to develop you as a staff member to make you even more effective for the company. So as a line manager, when I'm assessing my own team or people that I'm hiring for RightFinder, someone that's got a good understanding of where they're strong and where they could be developed, that's going to make my life and my job a lot easier because I can work in partnership with them rather than going, hey, Willem, I'm really sorry, you're not very good at this. Let's work on it together. And I'd frame it a bit more diplomatically. And if Willem was like, well, actually, no, I'm pretty sick, you know, it would be difficult. Whereas, you know, having that two-way dialogue and understanding, that shows me that they completely kind of understand their own context. And that's someone that I can work with far more effectively.
Amazing.
Awesome advice. Thank you so much.
Answer your question there, Surya?
Yep, totally.
Fantastic. All right, so we are at the end of time. Tim, before we say goodbye, as always, we like to assign some homework. So in your opinion, what is something that the audience can do in the next week, take them maybe about an hour to practice some of what we talked about here today?
Oh, good one. So if you're going into an interview scenario, remember, you're not bad at anything. You just have areas to be developed. If you're actively searching for jobs, schedule some time when it works best for you to search for jobs, to skill yourself up, and to network. And if you want to practice networking, feel free to send me a practice message. I'm not going to judge you or have a go at you. I can give you some direct, honest feedback on stuff if you need it. But yeah, that's kind of little bits of homework depending on your situation. If you haven't already, sign up for a game jam. Do it. Make a game.
So the homework is like
everything.
All right, wait. Rephrase it for me one time. Let's get down in a sentence.
Remember, no weaknesses, just areas of development.
Yeah.
Block time to do stuff like networking, job searching, applications, whatever. Free.
Awesome.
Sign up for a game jam. If you want to practice any of that networky stuff, just drop me a message.
All right, awesome. Okay, so your homework is to block out some time. This is what I'm going to say. To block out some time for networking, to block out some time for skill building, and then to schedule a game jam. Do it.
Yes.
Why do I have to still tell you this?
Make a game so I can play it.
I want to play your video games. Next weekend, which will be the weekend that this comes out. So if you're listening to this after the fact, we actually have our Founders Jam. This is basically just a regular old jam. You have 4 days to build the game in this one, so a little bit longer than typical. And the big difference, or the thing we're doing differently on this one, is at the end of those 4 days, you actually get to pitch your game to a panel of judges. They're mostly community judges. We're not bringing in publishers or anything like that. But definitely you're going to get some feedback on the game, and you'll get to practice pitching your game as if you were pitching it to publishers. So we'd love to have you come in and do the Founders Jam. If you're listening to this, that means it's this coming weekend, so do it. If you're here in the room with us, it's next weekend. Okay, I think that's it. Do it. Tim, do you have any last messages you want to give or anything you want to plug here at the very end?
Good luck out there. If you like people who dress up as a medieval knight and is sometimes funny on LinkedIn, you can drop me a connect or a follow. If not, completely understand.
Get it. It gotta be, I feel like it's like at least 30% of the time that you're funny. Like solid 30.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe
funny now and then.
Yeah. God, maybe 40. I don't know. Depends on the day. All right. It's been so wonderful, Tim. Thank you for hopping on the show with us. Thank you. Absolutely. Always a pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And for those who asked questions, thank you for your questions. If you are listening after the fact, we thank you for listening. And as always, we ask that you send this along to just one other person who is somebody else who needs to learn how to be an irresistible games job candidate. We'll see everybody again next week. There's links to join the Discord down below. And I think that's it. Come do the Founders Jam with us. All right.
Bye.
Goodbye, everyone. Adios.